Good evening, fellow Jays and friends. This is Mark Clapper, class of 1996 and Executive Director of College Engagement at Elizabethtown. And I am so excited. I'm so honored tonight to be hosting this season premiere, I guess is what we'll call it, the first of our Etown Alumni Features Series events for 2021 and for the spring semester. And I couldn't be more excited to introduce this evening a friend of mine, a classmate of mine, and a fellow Blue Jay, Jeremy Bitz, class of 1996. And Jeremy is a mass communications major at Etown, was a mass communications major at Etown with a minor in business administration. And he is an accomplished media operations and content executive who has more than 2 decades of experience innovating and launching channels and networks and products for news and sports industries. And currently, Jeremy is the principal client engagement leader for iStream Planet, which is WarnerMedia's top streaming video technology company. And he has spent almost a decade in various leadership roles at Time Warner Cable and Charter Communications as well. He worked with building out and running the digital and linear networks businesses, and including, what that means is that it actually includes more than 15, or it included more than 15 24-hour local news channels, 18 24-hour local sports channels, and 2 regional sports networks, including the Los Angeles Lakers and Los Angeles Dodgers. So that's a lot, without question. And prior to that, earlier in his career, he was a news assistant who held numerous behind-the-scenes positions at New York One in New York One News in New York City. And he spearheaded coverage of multiple US presidential elections, 2004, 2008, and 2012. He traveled to the Middle East to cover Operation Iraqi Freedom. And he was also lead field producer at the World Trade Center following the 9/11 attacks. So talk about a wealth of experiences and diverse experiences. I mean, it's incredible to think all the things that he's been involved with. And it's no surprise, having that much experience, that much exposure, that much professional expertise, that he's been recognized for several prestigious honors for his work in the television industry. And that includes a national NABJ award, 2 NYABJ News Awards in international journalism for stories he produced in the Middle East following Operation Iraqi Freedom. And he's also a Cable Ace Award winner and received an Emmy nomination for producing a half-hour news special based on the crash of TWA Flight 800. So that's a lot, and he's been recognized a lot, and he's still going. He's his trajectory is up and up at this point. And so tonight, though, what he's going to be doing is he's going to be kind of looking at his life, his career, from Etown onward. You know, he was a station manager at ECTV when he was a student, and I remember those days very, very well. And he's going to be kind of walking through some of his experience from Etown throughout his career, but he's also going to explore noteworthy transformations that have taken place, especially within the past 10 months, related to global technology and journalism and entertainment. And all of us right now have been affected by the pandemic in different ways. And I think it's very easy to think about the importance of technology and media and access to information and content. But Jeremy's also going to talk about the importance of the content itself, which is a really, really important nuance to all of this. And he's going to be kind of thinking about how content plays such a huge role in how all of us receive our news and how we're entertained. So that's a whole lot. And we're going to be looking at, with Jeremy, he's going to be helping us look at the current scenario with COVID-19, but then also what we can look forward to in the months, hopefully very, very soon, more sooner than later, where we're coming out of the pandemic, and what's the effect of these months on the future. So without any further ado, folks, I'm so happy to introduce to you Jeremy Bitz. Jeremy, welcome.
Hi, Mark. Hi, everybody. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Great to see everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jeremy, that it's a mouthful, and rightfully so. You have done so many things. It's so
Thank
impressive.
you. Thank you so
Um,
much.
yeah, absolutely. And we're going to be digging into a whole lot of that. And I'm so excited you have a presentation for us, and you're going to be showing some pictures and things. But before we do that, you and I are classmates, and
Yeah.
we've been friends since our days as students, and came in at the same time, and had a lot of similar friends and things like that. But I think, for me, one of the big memories that I have of you is that you were so involved at Etown with communications. And I think of when I think of Jeremy Bitz, I think of Steinman Center, and rightfully so. I mean, you spent so many hours, countless hours in there. And I think about how you were station manager at ECTV, and some of the different news programs. We were talking about this a little bit earlier on. We were talking about how News 40 was one of the shows that was kind of an ongoing big thing when we were students, and Talk of the Towns was another one, involved so many of our classmates and other students during our years. But then we had other shows, kind of the feature programming of ECTV. I remember Jump Into Fitness with Kim Powers, and Segway with Dusty Paddock, and lots of things like that. But you were somebody who had such an integral role in so many of those different things, and that doesn't even scratch the surface of some of the ways that you helped ECTV innovate during your time. So tell me a little bit about, from you directly. That's kind of my observation from afar, but tell me about, your remembrances of Etown and Steinman, and, all of those different experiences you had.
Well, one of the reasons why I chose Etown originally was because I came from a high school environment where we had a lot of the things I wanted in college. We had a remote truck for TV production. We had a live channel. We had studios. We did weekly shows. We were doing that. I started doing that work in 8th and 9th grade, which is
Wow.
crazy. That's a lifetime ago for sure. And so when I was looking for, where did I want to go to school, it was really that type of environment that I was looking for, and I wanted to be able to do that in year one as a freshman, right? You look at a bigger school, at a Temple or Penn State or whatnot, and, yeah, you can do that, but you've got to be a junior, senior, grad student, and that's not what I wanted to do. I didn't want to miss a beat in what I was doing, and I was excited right away by Bob Moore and Hans Wenberg and Marty Thompson, who said, who sort of as a excited student, there's the palette, go figure it out, don't get into trouble, and do some fun and cool stuff. And we really were able to build out the idea of what was Channel 40 going to be, what was the programming going to be, what was when I was station manager, what was the board going to be. I had 9 or 10 other board members who did various duties underneath me or with me to be able to drive our channel forward and be able to do stuff. We actually, while I was a junior, was the first time we decided to take the equipment out of Steinman into the field. And I actually used to bring a little tow-along trailer up on a Friday, and we'd take the equipment over to the high school and do high school football and school board meetings, and the first Etown Christmas parade downtown, where we set up in the square there for the Christmas parade and during the holiday season, and really be able to start to make the programming that the college was doing on the channel relative to the community, right? Because the cable channel was available beyond the campus, and I thought that would be a cool thing to be able to experiment with. And initially there was some, you're going to take the equipment where and do what with it, but once we did it a little bit and things didn't get broken and the programming was good and there was good reaction from the community, and the newspaper, the Etown Chronicle, I think they called
Yeah.
it, if I remember.
Yeah.
They did a little feature about it, and that was good. And so it was good for the school, and it was great to be able to be a part of that so long ago. Really, I really enjoyed that time.
Yeah. Well, no kidding. And it was something that kind of really helped, like you had said, it built a bridge with the town, and we were talking earlier on. I remember, as a student going to one of the churches in town and looking through the bulletin and seeing that the service was going to be broadcast on WWEC. And that was a
Sure.
point of pride for me. I thought that was a really, really cool thing. And it wasn't just that church, it was multiple churches in town and things. So it's so cool to know that you played an integral role in helping that come into being. So it's very cool. And those are the days that streaming and broadcasting a lot different then than what it is now.
Yeah,
There's
I
no
mean,
Wi-Fi and no T1 or anything like that.
and listen, the amount of investment to be able to have anything, right? I mean, you
Yeah,
think about what it costs to build out a program like what Etown had at that time, equipment wise, and now we do it with laptops and in some cases cell phones. I mean, it's in it seems like a long time, but the amount of development in this period of time, and certainly what's happened in the past 10 months, which I'll talk about in a little while, is crazy. Well,
yeah.
how much has happened so quickly.
Light speed. Yeah. So, so Steinman, you had so many long hours in there, and probably they flew by because you were doing something that you loved. But and you mentioned a couple of people that made an influence. They were very influential in your life.
Sure.
You know, and you also mentioned kind of what drew you to E-Town, um, but what are the things about E-Town outside of communications that had an impact on you, or was that really the driving factor for you? I mean, for different students, it's different things. But what was it for you that tipped the scales? And if it was the communications program, that's great.
I mean, communications was the driver, but I was definitely looking for a school that was on the smallish side, right? I mean, I
Yeah,
grew up in Reading, Pennsylvania, not far, right? So this is, not an environment, not a community or an environment that I'm not familiar with, right? I was kind of looking for that where it was, sort of rural but close enough that you could go to Hershey or Harrisburg or Lancaster or Park City Mall or what have you, and
yeah,
get out, and that was okay. And then for the school itself, just and later on, you sort of think about this in hindsight. The idea of educate for service, right, is does ring true in some ways in life. And you think about, the importance of utilizing your knowledge and your skill set or your contacts or what have you to be able to give back to the communities in which we live, and the those areas in which we decide to give that service back to. That continues to ring true, and that probably started D-Town for me as well.
oh, that's very cool. Yeah. Well, and it is interesting as an alum, and our class is coming up on a class reunion this fall, and it's a monumental one. I mean, it's 25 years, so think about that. I mean, that's it doesn't seem like it's possible,
No, it
but
doesn't.
it is. And
Yes.
it does kind of get you thinking through, like, wow, what are these touch points in my life, and how it has transformed. So it sounds like that motto, that educate for service motto, is something that has kind of lingered with you.
Sure.
But some people point to different things about E-Town, and sometimes it's something that's very tangible, like a motto or an ethos or something, but sometimes it's something a little less tangible.
Right.
And what are the things about E-Town that linger with you? What are the things that kind of you can look back and say, yeah, that was a transformational time for me, and this is why.
Yeah, I think figuring out how the work goes beyond communication, right? It's how are you as a student at the time, or as a young adult, going to think about, I have all these responsibilities, there's all this work to do, there's all these things, there's all these different people, there's all this input, and how are you going to make that sort of work in your life?
Yeah.
And I think, college served that purpose for me, to be able to say, here's the end goal, here's the tasks, here's the expectation, and let's run with this. And on top of it, doing all the other things that we talked about with ECTV and others, which of course was being above and beyond that. But that's really what the college served for me, as well as lasting uh, um, career and resume and life advice from professors and friends and now colleagues, etc. I mean, people I still reach out to and send a resume or a LinkedIn link over to and say, hey, you're out of touch with this, but what do you think? Does this make sense? What do I value that input still today.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's great. And, I do think that there's something really special about the Etown network. And,
For
we
sure.
were talking before this live stream started, and you were telling me about, the network of friends that you have that you were in touch with when you were, earlier on in your career in New York City. We were talking about another classmate of ours, Kate Miller, who you worked in the same building with her,
Sure.
the same area, and you would get together, compare notes, just check in with each other every now and
For sure.
then. But there were some others as well. Some others in that Blue Jay family. Who are the other people that you still keep in touch with today?
Yeah, people like Dusty Paddock out in Los Angeles, right? Dusty has his own career in media and communication, and Dusty and I were close because when I was also student assistant to the chairman of the department, and I took over for Dusty, who was the person before me. So we spent a lot of time together, and I still talk to Dusty every now and again. People across the alumni network. I served on the alumni board for a while at Etown and did some things like that. So there's some people there, but certainly some individuals within the communication, mostly in the communication world, is where I've spent that time.
It's a family. I mean,
Yeah,
communications. You put so many hours in, and you're so engrossed in the products, and it's not just one project at the end of the semester. It's like a project sometimes multiple times per
sure,
week,
sure.
and working on the toaster at the time, and
Yeah,
some of those pieces of equipment, making them do what you want to do, and
right.
cutting tape to put things together, and so on. Like, you just put a lot of effort in, and so it does become a family, which is
Sure.
very cool. Yeah. So so I'm curious to know, you mentioned earlier on, or just now, that you were a member of the Alumni Council and you served in that way. You kind of kept E-Town in your heart, and kept giving back in that way. You also
Sure.
served on the Leadership Council too. So,
Yeah.
so I want to call those things out. That's really awesome that you did that, that you gave of your time and your expertise in that way. And it makes a huge difference when people do that. So thank you so much for those years.
Of course. Yeah. No, it felt great to do that, and would like to try to do that again in the future. When the opportunity arises, for sure.
Fantastic. I'm your guy. Let me know.
Good.
Yeah. No, but that's great. So, I think, I kind of gave a little bit of a rundown for you. It
Sure.
didn't nearly give you justice. But, I'm really excited to kind of go through this journey, of your time from E-Town into your career, and in all of the different places and things that you've done. So, are you ready to take us into your presentation?
Yeah, sure. I want to spend a bit and walk through a bunch of behind the scenes stories, and then talk about where we are now and where we're headed. That'd be great.
Fantastic. Take us
Okay.
away.
Okay. So what I'd like to do is start. I'm going to share my screen here if I can. I'm going to offer up a bunch of photos here to be able to walk us through some of this. I wanted to start with some of my behind the scenes experience covering TWA Flight 800, which was in July of 1996. TWA was a Boeing 747 that was on its way from John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York to Paris, France. And the plane actually blew up over the South Shore of Long Island. This was a July evening, very hot. And I'll talk about the reasons for the tragedy in just a minute. But I was at home that evening. I had just started my work at New York One as a associate producer, shooter, writer, editor. So somebody who goes out in the field and essentially gathers news throughout the day. And I was sent out to be able to cover the crash that night. This a picture taken of the top of the cockpit being brought up on one of the ships out over the Atlantic. Um, I want to be able to share these pictures from a behind the scenes angle. The essentially where the jet had gone into the ocean was like 10 miles out from the shore. You couldn't really see it from any point on land, but we could sort of see boat activity, etc. And we had heard where they were going to be bringing all of the wreckage on shore. They were going to take the wreckage, they were going to transport it on trucks to a location that was still yet to be determined, so the investigators could sort of reassemble the wreckage and be able to find a cause for this terrible tragedy that killed 230 people. So we found out very late one evening that there was an area at a private golf course in a country club, very close to the water's edge, where you could sort of see some of the boat activity. So picture this, all the members of the press at the time who were covering the tragedy, so a couple of hundred media outlets, driving across Long Island in the middle of the night to go to this country club that of course was closed. We hot-wired a bunch of golf carts, believe it or not, with our equipment, and actually hid in the bushes on this golf course for the better part of probably about 2.5 weeks, as the National Transportation Safety Board and the U.S. Navy and the Coast Guard brought the wreckage up off the shore of off the bottom of the ocean to be able to put it onto trucks. They of course knew that we were there, but it was an opportunity to be able to get a good vantage point to be able to see what was going on. This was from my time on board the USS Grasp. The Grasp and the Grapple were Coast Guard wreckage ships that were dispatched out into the ocean to be able to bring the wreckage of the plane up. Now this picture takes us to a place in Calverton, Long Island. This is the old Grumman factory where they used to make fighter jets. Actually, the F-14 was made on Long Island. This was the factory where that was done back in the 60s and 70s. And it's now just a big empty campus. And it is a campus. It's a massive area. There's runways there. There's scientific buildings, et cetera. The Federal Aviation Administration took over the facility to be able to do the reconstruction of the plane. And this covering this story, I covered Flight 800 for actually almost 2.5 years, from the night of the tragedy all the way through the investigation, through the point that the government was willing to say what caused the incident. And we were invited by the investigators out to Calverton, out to this building, to be able to take a look and see this picture taken inside. Essentially, the reconstruction is the largest aviation reconstruction ever taken place. And essentially what they did was, these really, really, really smart guys sit there and put everything back together that they can to be able to figure out what happened. The National Transportation Safety Board actually now uses this as a technology lab to be able to train investigators, even today, this back in 1996. And so as a member of the press, we went into this building, and you're kind of staring at this and you're like, okay, how do I make a story out of this? Because I don't know anything about this. This is well beyond what I went to school for, what I'm an expert in, et cetera. And they matched us up with a investigator who walked us through. And you walk through, you stood in the middle of the centered fuel tank, you walk through what was left of the passenger cabin, walk through what was left of the cockpit, and they explain to you what happened, where it happened, you look at wiring and diagrams, et cetera. And from that, you create a story and obviously talk to the larger audience as to what had occurred. What did occur in this crash was they believe that there was vapor in the center fuel tank underneath the 747, essentially this center green area there. It was a very hot evening in Long Island at JFK Airport before takeoff, and it created gas vapor in the tank. 747s at the time had a lot of chafing on wires that would run through the tank. There was a spark, and it blew up the plane, very tragically. Obviously, it was a horrific incident. I actually covered 14 major airline crashes in my time as a journalist, this being the first. But just sort of rewinding to where that started. And again, this was July of 96. I graduated Etown in May of 96. So this was 2 months later, covering what was the largest story, certainly for that year, and one of the largest aviation incidents in the country since then. I want to move forward to talk a little bit about September the 11th. And 9/11, this picture taken that I took on the West Side Highway going down the side of Manhattan. As you see the towers there burning and looking downtown on our way down to be able to cover the incident. I was assigned to be the senior field producer down in Lower Manhattan for New York One at the time. because I knew a lot about plane crashes. I knew a lot about terrorism, federal investigation, et cetera, from experiences like Flight 800 and others. And they wanted me to be able to be down there and sort of help navigate the story from that angle. And I spent all but 9 hours of the first 14 days following 9/11 down at the site, covering the story for New York One and for other news outlets. Now, the story I want to talk about is when we got down there. This picture taken from across the street of what was left of the towers, so on top of the World Financial Center. I wasn't getting the type of coverage I wanted. I wasn't getting to see what I wanted. I was not nearly close enough. We were sort of back a number of blocks. It wasn't safe, right? You weren't supposed to certainly be in the wreckage or in the rubble. But I had a small camera with me, at the time. And now we use phones for this purpose, but at the time it was a small mini cam, essentially a small handy cam like you would have as a family or as a tourist. And I thought, well, what would happen if we lent this camera to one of the workers who's going in to do work, and he'd be able to record some stuff maybe and bring it back? Wouldn't that be a cool thing to do? Now, this is New York City, right? I'm going to give this camera to somebody. What are the chances that I'm going to get it back? Much less back in one piece, much less back with anything that I want, et cetera. It's zero, right? It's not going to happen. But I thought, well, let's give this a try, because I'm not getting what I want to anyway. So myself and the reporter who I was working with were kind of hanging out there by a couple blocks away, and there was a young iron worker who was making his way out from the work that he was conducting on the site. And I walked over to him and I introduced myself and told him who I was and what I wanted to do and where I was from. And I said, listen, I'll show you how to use this camera. You can take it in, and wouldn't that be cool? You could record this stuff and I'll interview you afterwards and we'll put you on TV, and, you can talk about the hard work that's being done in there and the horrific scene. And he said, no, I can't do it. I'd lose my job, and I'd love to help, but I just don't think I can do it. I said, well, what if I gave you the camera afterwards? You can keep the camera. I just want the videotape. At that time, this is 2001. We're still shooting on videotape. And he said, are you serious? And I said, yeah, you can keep the camera. I just want the tape. He said, okay, you got yourself a deal. And we agreed to meet back 2 hours later, exactly where I was at the time. I gave him the camera. I showed him how to use it. And there he goes towards the World Trade Center side. He walks off, and I immediately got like this bad feeling, like, oh man, this was not a good idea. This isn't going to work out. He's not going to come back. I'm not going to get anything. I don't have a camera anymore. I'm going to get fired. This is a disaster. So I'm kind of, 2 hours is a long time when you've got that, anxious feeling, obviously. We're kind of hanging out. 3 hours go by, 3.5 hours go by. The guy's not coming back. I thought, oh, we really blew this. And all of a sudden I start to see him come out. I thought, oh my God, that's our guy. And I see he's got our camera. And another producer from another news network pulls him aside. And I found that out this afterwards because he explained it to me. The other producer offered him $18,000 for whatever was on the videotape that he was carrying. No questions asked. I'll give you $18,000 right now for that tape. He said no. He came over to me because he had made a promise to me, which is unheard of. And I'm still just floored that I have this story in my life. Showed me the tape. He was very, very proud. He apologized. He was late. He was under in one of the catacombs and it took him longer. And, he was like in the mall that was under the World Trade Center where you could see the Sbarros and the J. Crew store and, all this really amazing footage. And I said, I took the tape out. I interviewed him. And I said, I gave him the camera. And he said, are you serious? And I said, you did your job. Now we'll do ours. And I took the tape and we aired it as exclusive footage for days and sold it to HBO and others for documentaries later on and other things. But it was the first time that I had to, where you're really thinking outside of the box as to, okay, here something of this magnitude, which is so horrific and such a horrible, horrible story that's happening, in my town, in my city. And how do I want to cover it and what can we do? And that morning, that type of creative thought paid off. Now I'll move ahead to talking for a few minutes about Operation Iraqi Freedom. Now I wanted to go to the Middle East for a big reason. I knew that, putting all politics aside, that the war in Iraq was going to be linked to what had happened on September the 11th in many people's minds, and the reason for going, etc. And I thought, it's a natural progression from the 9/11 story that I had worked so hard on to tell in New York. And so we went to the Middle East in early of 2003. And at the time, New York One, who I was still working for, was owned by Time Warner Cable, and Time Warner, which also owns CNN. So we utilized CNN's operations there to be able to conduct coverage during the war period. And I was there for in Iraq and Kuwait and Bahrain and Saudi Arabia and Turkey for about three and a half months, telling those stories, important stories during the early days of the wartime. Now, a lot of people have asked over time, what is that like, and how do you like do your business while you're there? Well, this is actually taken on the Iraqi border. I'm standing on one side of the road behind me. I'm there on the left in a vest. Behind me is Kuwait. In front of me, and essentially where I'm standing is the border on Iraq. Those are coalition force jeeps there in front of me that we were going with to be able to go to what was called the Rumeila oil fields, where when Saddam Hussein pushed his troops north, he knew that the value of the country's infrastructure was based predominantly on oil. And so there's what's called the scorched earth policy, which is they lace the oil fields, the valves of the oil fields with hand grenades and pull the pins, and they blow up the oil fields to be able to destroy the natural resource that they felt that the coalition troops wanted to capture and take advantage of at the time. I wanted to go see that. So we traveled every couple of days. We'd go north out of Kuwait into Iraq. But in Kuwait City itself, where we worked together with CNN, an operation like CNN or one of these major networks that is sending, perhaps 1,000 people, perhaps 1,800 people, perhaps a couple thousand people into the region for, a year, 2 years, 3 years at a time. It's actually cheaper and easier to buy a hotel. You buy cars, you buy security, you set up a life in region, right? Because imagine you've got 1,800 people in Kuwait working for you. What are you going to get? 1,800 hotel rooms for 3 years? No, you're going to buy a building, right? So this is actually inside of what used to be a Radisson hotel that CNN and Time Warner bought for CNN at the time to be able to cover the early days of our Operation Iraqi Freedom. This was our studio and workspace. These used to be hotel rooms, and they essentially gut them. Right, you tear down the walls, you put in lots of equipment, lots of wiring, you put satellite dishes on the roof. This technology is much smaller and simpler today than it was even back now in 2003. But people just have no idea. You turn on CNN and you see Wolf Blitzer standing with the Kuwaiti skyline behind him. He's probably standing in a hotel that the network bought, where they tore down the wall to be able to see the towers behind him. It was really just something that I had never thought of, certainly as a student or as a journalist in my early years, as to, this is how this gets done. And it was amazing to see. Well, for us, because we're traveling back and forth, as you saw in the picture I just shared, going to places like this was the Rumeila oil fields. You can see a Navy SEAL here who's keeping guard with his machine gun at the time that we were touring with. We needed to be able to have a car to be able to go in and out of region each and every day. Well, you would think, how do you get a car, right? You land in Kuwait. I've got my U.S. passport with my Kuwaiti visa, and I want to be able to rent a car. Well, an Avis customer, I'm an Avis guy. I went up to the Avis counter, and I wanted an SUV. I wanted an SUV because we had a lot of equipment, because we're going to go a lot, because the roads are not great, etc. And the Avis agent looked at me and she said, "Are you a journalist?" And I said, "I am." And she looked at my visa, which says I'm a journalist. And she said, "I can give you an SUV." And I said, "Okay, well, what's the deposit?" And she said, $18,000 US. And I said, I've never heard of such a thing. I've rented hundreds of cars in my life, and that's preposterous. What is that? And she said, "It's very simple. You're a journalist. You're going to take our car. You're going to drive it into Iraq. You're probably not going to return it, and you're buying the car." Well, I wasn't going to do that. I had never heard of that. I didn't have the experience at the time to even know that that's what you do. So I said, well, what's the next biggest car that you can give me that doesn't have that? And she said, well, we'll give you a big sedan, and that will have to do. It was this big, like, Lincoln thing, and just a big car, right? I thought, okay, we'll make this work, and away we go. Well, sure enough, we drove it for the months that we were there. We tore the bumper off, the tires were shot, the hubcaps were gone. I mean, because it's driving through. You're in cities and countries that are under siege, et cetera. It's a hard. It's not an easy environment from an infrastructure standpoint. So we went to return the car when we were going to leave Kuwait to fly back to the States. And I was terrified. I saw that that there was all this damage to the car, et cetera. So we had actually reattached the back bumper of the car with wire ties, plastic cable ties, just to be able to to have some semblance of this is the way that you rented us the car, so we wouldn't have all these charges and all this trouble. So I pull up, and the guy comes out, and he's got his full hijab on, and he's very, very serious, and he's inspecting cars being returned. And he's looking at my car, and he's walking around, and he goes to the back bumper. He looks at the back bumper, and he looks at me, and he looks at the back bumper, and he goes to kick it. And I knew that if he kicked it, it would fall off, and that I'd have to explain what had happened, and it would not be awesome. And just as he went to do that, another crew, actually from the BBC, pulled up behind us with an SUV. All of their glass windows were shattered and gone. The side of the car had this huge dent in it, and one of the tires had something massively wrong with it. And the guy looked at me, and he looked at the car behind me, and he looked at me, and he said, "No problem, my American friend. Thank you for renting from Avis." I went in, and we got to fly home. But so it's just getting some of that basic infrastructure. In that case, just a rental car, right, to be able to go and tell our stories and do our coverage. That picture taken, that's me at the oil well, one of the oil well fires. That was oil well number 17. How I remember that, I don't know. In the Rumaila oil fields, which is in the southern region of Iraq, right after the coalition troops had pushed the Iraqi troops northward outside of the major cities. Now, as Mark had said, I did spend a lot of time covering presidential politics. 2008, 2012, 2004, 8, 12, and actually some of 16 as well. That's a lot of presidential politics, and I'm happy to have that experience for sure. Don't need to necessarily do it again, but 2008 was by far in all of those my most favorite. We had Rudy Giuliani, Mayor Giuliani, running on a Republican ticket. We had Hillary Clinton, the senator of New York at the time, running on the Democratic ticket. Barack Obama, of course, President Obama, coming to light and sort of feeling his presidential oats at the time, and getting obviously a lot of traction very quickly, ultimately becoming president. And it was an exciting election to cover. I had started covering the presidential election. Actually, 2.5 years prior was the first time that Hillary Clinton traveled to Iowa to be able to see if there was traction for her to be able to run for the office. So that's how long these election cycles went as a journalist. It was pretty crazy. But when we cover part of the presidential election coverage, of course, is covering the national conventions. This picture taken at the Democratic National Convention in Denver, Colorado, in the summer of 2008. And national conventions are a lot of fun. It's an exhausting 2 weeks, but it's a lot of fun. It's essentially, if you have ever been, you know this, and if you haven't been but have watched on TV, you've probably come to guess it's 8,000 or 9,000 delegates and 20 to 30 to 40,000 media people from the media industry get together somewhere in the country to be able to listen to the Democrats talk for a week, and then do the same for the Republicans the second week. And it's depending on which party is in office, the holding office decides that cadence. And in Denver, it was interesting. And this picture will reveal a lot in a few minutes. Usually these conventions are held in a hockey or basketball arena, right? What does a hockey or basketball arena hold? It holds 18, 19,000 people. The press comes in, and the party comes in for 2 to 3 months. They take over the arena. They set up, they tear down the skyboxes and make broadcast suites. They turned practice courts into media workspace. They set up delegation areas, party spaces, etc., to be able to set up for this, essentially what is a big TV show for a week. Well, in Denver, there's if you've ever been to where the sports facilities are there, there's what was called at the time the Pepsi Center, which is the basketball and hockey arena up on the hill. And down beneath it is what was called Invesco Stadium, which is where the Denver Broncos play, the football field. All sort of nested together, which is sort of commonplace now for pro sports. But at the time, it was one of the first where they're that close together. We had just finished our media walkthrough. Now, keep in mind, the convention is supposed to take place in July. The walkthrough is about 5-6 weeks before, where all the media flies in for a day. You go to meetings, you look at everything, you talk about the event, you figure out how you're going to do it, et cetera, and sort of tighten up the coverage. And so we're walking through with the Obama campaign people. And at that point, Senator Obama is going to become the nominee. His committee, his campaign committee, is in charge of a lot about what happens during the convention, obviously as the presumptive nominee. And we're standing outside. We had just taken the tour of the Pepsi Arena, the 17,000 seat, basketball arena. We're standing outside the Pepsi Arena and having in the large press corps that we were, having a conversation about, the parking lot or whatever we were talking about. And one of the Obama people pointed at the football stadium across the way and said, "We'd rather do that." And everybody heard that. And we're like, what are you gonna do there? We've been doing this for months. We have millions of dollars invested in this. We have, all this facility built, et cetera. What are you talking about? And essentially what they wanted to do was the Obama for America people felt that they wanted, rather than a 17,000 person audience, they wanted an 85,000 person audience, which is what Invesco Stadium or the Broncos Stadium holds. And they wanted that type of picture. So the final night, a convention is 4 nights. The final night where the nominee speaks they were going to switch venues and have it in the football stadium. Well, just keep in mind the logistics behind moving that during a national security event or at all is ridiculous, right? You're going to try to pull that off. Well, sure enough, of course, you're not given a choice. You're told what to do. And so we did make that work. So we ended up making between nights 3 and 4, essentially night 3 ends at 11 o'clock at night. Day 4 begins at 6 o'clock the next morning. And in that time, under Secret Service guidance, you move and set up one facility to the other, which was extremely complicated and massively expensive at the time. So the NFL, of course, had signed off on the ability for the Democratic National Convention Committee to do this. So, it's the Broncos Stadium. They're in preseason football. This is the summer. The Broncos were set to play a preseason game there just a couple days after the event. And so the NFL and the Broncos organization had to sign off on it. This picture taken in the middle of the football field there in Invesco as we were getting ready for the coverage that evening. Well, this all sounds great. And sure, this is going to look amazing. And what a huge event, and what a feat that we moved one thing to the other, et cetera. Well, I'm kind of wandering around, just waiting for the evening to get closer. And I got word that the NFL and the Bronco organization had no sense of the number of people who were going to be on the field, right? All these people are standing on the turf that the Broncos are going to play on a couple days later. And so the DNCC, the Democratic National Convention Committee, had to quickly come up with a process to be able to eliminate or take a bunch of the people off of the field who were there, at the time of this picture. So they were going to have a special credential that you would have to be able to get that access. So that special credential, well, how many are they going to give? Well, they're going to give you like 2 or 3. Well, we had like 100 people on the field. I mean, so we're going to take 100 people and make it 2 or 3. That's crazy. How is that going to be possible? Well, I did a little digging and talked to some friends, et cetera. And I found out that what you needed to do was you needed to have a blue dot on your credential. So these are blue Avery dots, right? Little dots that you put on documents. And if you had a blue circle on your credential, you'd be given access to the field. So I remember I ran over to one of our interns and I gave him $200. And I said, go find a Staples and buy every blue dot you can find. He came back and he had this huge bag of blue dots, and we put a blue dot on everybody's credential. So everybody had access to the field that night. We were actually, that was a picture taken from our vantage point there of then president or then nominee Senator Obama accepting the nomination to be the Democratic nominee in the race in 2004 or 2008 rather. So we were able to keep our people in the field, but it was a bit of a harrowing experience that night to be able to pull that off and bring things together. Now I want to switch gears for a second, and I'm going to stop sharing. And there I am. So I'm back. I want to bring this full circle to kind of talk about for a couple of minutes the past 10 months, because I think about those pictures and I think about those stories and sort of where all of that was at the time, and even up until just a year ago, sort of where we were and what we were doing. And I'm sure many of you have done the same, but from a media standpoint, and think about where we're headed. There's really been a huge shift in focus in our industry from what I call pre-COVID till now. I mean, pre-COVID in media, we were talking about product launches, things like Disney Plus, right, and Peacock that NBC was doing, and other types of products that were coming to market, how exciting that was going to be, and slow growth, right? Peacock was going to launch with 1 million users, and then it was going to go to 2 million in year 5, and people are going to start streaming, and won't that be really cool and neat? And it was going to be slow, right? We're talking about 5G for phones. We're talking about the spectrum auction, cord cutting, as many of you may have done. Have you cut the cable cord and now you get content other ways? The growth for mobile, and just being able to capture what we call the magical six. Magical six is essentially there's the idea that people have 6 hours of time in their day to be able to consume content one way or another. Now, it doesn't mean we're consuming content this way, but maybe it's via your phone, a second screen. It's in some ways you're absorbing 6 hours of content a day. And so a network or a programmer is thinking about, how do I get some of that 6 hours each and every day and what's my slice of that? Now, COVID happens, right? March of last year. We got a fireplace here at our COVID retreat, if you will, and we were burning newspaper. And we one of the other days we got to the newspaper that was the first case of COVID. It's like a January, February date, a year ago. And I thought, wow, that's just such a short time. So much has happened. COVID happens and everything changes, right? The future becomes current where it comes to full circle for technology and streaming. And really, for all of us, in-home entertainment becomes all we've got, right? We can't go to the movies. We're not going to go see a concert. We can't go to Broadway. We're not going to go to the theater. What we can do to entertain ourselves or learn, etc., all becomes inside. And for all of us, the total focus becomes on how do we outfit our home to be able to do that? What kind of Wi-Fi do we have? Who's providing our high-speed data? How reliable is it? How beefy is it? Can we work from home, learn from home, stream from home, all simultaneously? What does that look like? All of that stuff has become, the first thought of the day for us in just 10 months. And all of that infrastructure services some 50 billion connected devices globally. So there are 50 billion laptops, phones, smart refrigerators, TVs, et cetera, that are connected to the internet to be able to consume content in different ways that we're thinking about across the communication spectrum at this point. Now let's spend a minute and talk about local news during this period. Clearly, there's a huge need for local news and for news in general, right? To be able to find out information. Most important, I think people turn to local because we want to feel safe about what's going on with COVID rates in our area, what's happening with the schools or the churches or the states or the government, what's happening with our town, what's happening with vaccine, what's happening with the ability to be able to get on a vaccine list. All those sorts of topics come through news one way or another, right? And news organizations, I think, have taken the opportunity to become pretty mission focused during the time, particularly when it comes to COVID. Some outlets seeing over a 40% uptick in viewers and engagement across all their platforms during the time. And of course, one of the other things that becomes normal in our lives is the idea of the state or local government briefing, right? For us here in New York, Governor Cuomo is now like our friend, and every once, once a day he pops on and we listen to him and he tells us about what's happening. I'm sure many of you with state and local governments in your own way as well. Now, in addition to news, and this is where I spend my time now in my career, talking about streaming, over the top and direct to consumer has exploded for content. And this was a part of our industry that before COVID was, it was just in its infancy, and it's gone from infancy to like year 10 in 10 months. It's amazing what has happened in that space. I mean, there's a massive increase in streaming services. Think about these numbers for a second. Netflix has a total of 204 million subscribers. They're the largest globally. Disney Plus, which has been around for less than a year, is at 87 million. Amazon Prime Video is at 150 million users. HBO Max is at 38 million. And Peacock, NBC's product, is at 26 million subscribers. And most households, maybe yours as well, use at least 3 of those, if not 4, or perhaps even all 5, to be able to consume content and see all the, all the types of entertainment and happenings that we like to get across those platforms. Now, I thought it was interesting to pull, and I was doing some research on this just recently for a customer that I was talking to. What's the biggest day that we've seen since COVID started for this streaming, right? These 50 billion devices. What is the biggest day? Well, on April the 4th, American households watched a total of 27 billion minutes of streaming content in just one day. That's the equivalent of 52,000 years of content in one day. That is unbelievable. And to think that most of that didn't exist, certainly not to that point 10 months ago, is unbelievable. Now, on average, we as a population are consuming 6 to 8 hours of streaming content per day. That does include our Zoom calls, that does include remote education, et cetera. 6 to 8 hours per day, we're doing what we're doing right now, right? We're listening, we're learning, we're talking, we're entertaining, et cetera. And what is the consumer looking for? What are the top selections? Is it movies? Is it fitness? It's family programming. The ability to have a huge release of content libraries and first run offerings. And it's only going to grow from here. Now, where are we headed as we start the new year, right? We're here January the 28th, 2021. Hopefully, we're going to get back to some sense of normal. Not all of this goes back in the box. Not all of this resets that I've started to talk about, right? Some of this will remain, which obviously I'm very excited about, and people in our industry are very excited about moving forward. So I want to talk first about the entertainment industry. The entertainment industry looking for ways to embrace this and is embracing it in a number of different ways, particularly to movies, right? Disney is using Disney Plus for a number of their releases, and then we'll send some releases to the big screen, to the movie theaters as well, which they're doing right now in regions that don't have Disney Plus available. Once more movie theaters open up, they'll send them to the movie theater. Big things like Black Widow and big movies like that, whereas some smaller movies like Soul or other things, they'll put what we call on platform, on Disney Plus first. HBO is taking a different approach to it. HBO is saying, we want to do both at one time. They're going to send things to the movie theater and put it on HBO Max at the same time. So you can go watch it in a movie theater, or you can sit at home and watch it on your couch and consume it on HBO Max on the same day at the same time, just as they just did with Wonder Woman 84 back on Christmas Day. Now, sports is a big one. Sports is, and I've spent a fair amount of my career touching things in the sports world. Sports is sort of the last to be able to get seriously into streaming and into direct to consumer. There's a reason for that. Even the most bullish technology owners in professional sports, people like Mark Cuban or Steve Ballmer in basketball, have said, listen, they love technology, they love streaming, they love mobile, etc. But it is so lucrative to have us go, in the case of Mark Cuban, to the American Airlines Arena in Dallas and watch the Mavericks play and pay for a seat and buy a hot dog and pay for parking and buy a hat, and etc. They don't want to incite people to take them out of the arena to consume other ways. The arena is too lucrative for them. Well, I think what COVID does is it sort of forces that issue. Sports, beyond anything else, most other things, is going through a total reinvent, a total restart. What is we were talking today? I'm working on streaming for the Final Four for the NCAA. What is the Final Four in a bubble? Right, it's all going to be in Indianapolis. Like 16 arenas. All the teams are going to go there, et cetera. What is that going to be post COVID? And what is that going to be for broadcast, for cable, for streaming, et cetera? It's those type of discussions going forward. The other thing that sports is doing is they're going all in professional sports in many ways with gambling, with betting. So I've had a lot of experience in my career with regional sports networks. I helped launch the two in Los Angeles, one for the Dodgers and one for the Lakers. Many regional sports networks are spending this period of time getting together with gambling companies, most notably the Sinclair Broadcast Group, which owns what used to be the Fox regional sports networks. There's 19 of them. Did a merger together with Bally Gaming and rebranded them Bally. And they're going to be putting sportsbook and sports gambling into the streaming platform, with the idea, obviously, that that's an additional source of revenue. It's an additional way to be able to have people engage longer. It's the ability to make the product better, et cetera, and make it more sticky. Is that a good idea? We'll see. But that's coming because they're looking and saying, we've captured this audience. We're capturing this audience. We want to keep this audience. Here's a way that maybe we're going to be able to do that moving forward. And they're going all in on the sports gambling side. Now, what about local, right? What will come from things like remote education, perhaps religious organizations and religious streaming, from churches, community theater, Broadway, et cetera. These are all areas that are still sort of trying to find a model, trying to find a home. I was actually working with a company doing some consultancy that was doing high school sports streaming prior to COVID, right? Single camera, high school streaming of high school sports, high school football, basketball, baseball, et cetera. And obviously that went away when high school sports stopped in many states, and schools went remote. And we very quickly flipped that business to being able to stream churches like 3 weeks before Easter, right? Okay, maybe that's a business. Well, wouldn't you know, for Easter Sunday, we streamed like 450 church services for churches across the country. And now they've asked for, the ability to do remote offering and put in e-commerce so there can be subscription, like all this stuff that we're talking about for other things, we're talking about for church and religion, right? It's content. It's, not to be blasé about it, but it's content, but for different reasons. What will happen with these things moving forward, I think, is really interesting. And it's going to be, a lot of it's going to come full circle during 2021. Now I'm going to bring Mark back, and we can take a couple more questions. And it's just so great to be able to think through this as a group and sort of talk to the college and talk about some of the past. It's great to be able to share, Mark.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thank you so much for that. That you covered a whole lot, and
There's
I
a lot
say,
there. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I mean, it's dizzying almost to think of
It is.
how far we have come in such a short amount of time.
It
And
is.
and you and I have had some conversations leading up to today, and some of the different groups that are consulting with you and so on, like, the live element is something that's just such an unknown right now. And
Sure.
I think people are really itching for it, but at the same time, there's the push pull with it's so convenient to be at home. And
It is. Sure.
yeah. So what do you see in terms of, so we talked about sports, we talked a little bit about movies and things like that, but let's take it into the live entertainment realm a little bit. So we're thinking concerts and shows and things
Yeah.
like that. Where do you see that going?
I mean, listen, there is certainly the opportunity to stream that sort of entertainment, just like anything else, right? The difficulty with, and if you watch Hamilton on Disney Plus, right, and watch pieces of it, it's beautiful, it's neat, it's cool, it's on TV, it's available on platform. I can sit here, I can watch it, but it's not being in a Broadway theater,
Yeah,
right?
right.
There was actually a study that I read just recently talking about the what does an audience mean in person, to be able to consume that type of experience. And even if you're at home and you hear crowd noise and it's all pumped in, right? It's produced like there's 80,000 people there, but there's not. There's still that element of social interaction that's missing
Right.
from the experience. But it doesn't mean that it's not being thought about, right? Because ultimately, listen, Broadway has the smallest pieces of a plan for return. Like how does this stuff come back?
Yeah.
When you realize that, if you go to Midtown Manhattan and walk through Broadway and realize that the majority of these shows don't make money anyway, right? And if they have to socially distance in a theater, there's no model. You don't get there. So what can be done in the meantime to be able to do it? But unions have to agree that it has to be smart. It has to be good. It all has to exist in a certain place. It's even as extreme. I was on a call the other day where there's a group that's thinking about what about virtual exhibits for museums?
Mm-hmm.
How can you do artificial intelligence or essentially 3D modeling of museum exhibits at home via mobile technology?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, you can do that.
Yeah.
But is that the experience that we want to give? Is that where we want to take? It's all being discussed for sure.
Absolutely. And when you throw in an emerging technology like virtual reality, then that actually kind of expands the thinking as well.
Sure.
What type of experience is that going to provide for people? And I think even at the even at the college level, we've experienced it here at Etown as every college and university has, that you were forced into a place where health and human safety is something that's really important. So you
Sure.
pivot to remote, but the bread and butter of a place like Elizabethtown College, especially, is that interaction,
Sure.
that personal attention, and you can still get that, electronically, but it's not quite the same.
Yeah.
It's not the same.
Right.
So I know for us here at Elizabethtown, it's about trying to make the best out of this that we can, but there's such a desire to get back
Of
to
course.
what we do and do well,
Yeah.
and one of the questions that we've gotten from one of our audience members is, and it's an example, the Etown Church, the Brethren, has gone very deep into streaming content. And actually, that was a congregation that started streaming before COVID.
Got
So
it.
to pivot when COVID hit was not as much of a leap for them as what it is for a lot of places.
Yeah.
But this audience member asks, and it's almost a rhetorical question, because there's really no answer for it that you and I can have. But it's, how will a congregation choose to worship in the future? Because they will have an option.
Yeah.
Hopefully, if we can be healthy and well again, get back to in-person interaction, whether that's on campus or in a congregation, it's probably not an either or, it's a both and.
Yeah.
And the prospect of that then comes to, what are people going to choose?
Sure. Listen,
So
I think given the option of both is
yeah.
exciting. Listen, my folks live in a retirement home in Reading, right?
Mm-hmm.
And have some health complications, et cetera, which is why they're there. But yet they love to go to service on Sunday, right?
Mm-hmm.
But given the option to not leave the house and watch on a stream, that's probably better for them, COVID or not, right?
Yeah,
Because they don't need to be out traipsing through whatever to get to church, but yet they want to be religious in their own way.
sure. Yeah, absolutely.
It's but at the same time, and churches are funny, not funny, well, maybe funny, they're competitive about how many cameras, where they're placed, like all of a sudden this has gone from nothing to like this crazy competitive business that is really, really pretty wild to watch. But all of a sudden, a church needs,
Yeah.
a lot of it can be what I call automagical. We can do it on the back end, right? We can make technology run it, but you need somebody who understands the internet and what happens when the fiber fails. And it's not an AV staff,
Sure.
but it's not necessarily the custodian just ticking on a light.
Right.
there's a need there too, right?
Yeah, yeah,
This all sort of, because all this came quickly,
yeah,
remote education, like this, not that it's built on rubber bands, but there's a lot of work that's going to be done on the other side of this
sure.
to harden this, to harden security, to harden infrastructure, Zoom, etc., to be able to make things durable to what we're actually doing with it.
Hmm.
Because in the heat of the moment, there was no time to do so.
Right, right. Yeah, no question. Yeah. So, you had mentioned about the magical six, and
Yeah,
then you said it's kind of 6 to 8.
yeah, sure.
So, is it, is it the goal that all of these companies and so on expand it to the magical 10, the magical 12,
And,
you know?
listen, I think we're so surrounded. I mean, obviously, I'm a content guy, so I'm
Yeah,
surrounded by content a lot. But um, we're consuming an awful lot more than ever.
yeah,
um, and everybody wants a slice of that for
yeah,
all the reasons why the media industry exists, right? Because there's advertising value there, there's data value there, et cetera. So there's jockeying to be able to get that biggest piece. How
mhm,
does that work? We'll see.
yeah, yeah,
It's
absolutely.
when we talk about these direct to consumer products, the idea of the free window, right? We all get it for the trial period and then you
Right.
drop, right? Because who wants to keep it? Well, what has Disney done? Disney's been really smart about it. They're going to have Mandalorian, then they're going to have WandaVision, then they're going to do Loki, right? So they're always doing something
Yeah, sure.
every month. So if they're always doing something, then there's no reason to drop,
It's true.
right? Whereas Hulu, I'm going to get Hulu to watch the Super Bowl and then I'm done with it.
Then you're done.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's smart. Very smart. So, reflecting back on your career to date, understanding that, your horizon is still, way far to go ahead. Um, what impact do you hope to have, in your professional life, in the profession, so to speak?
sure.
What are you hoping to be your impact, your fingerprints on the profession? What would you like that to be?
Well, I have an interesting, because of the background, I check a bunch of boxes and I sort of straddle between experience in content,
Hmm.
experience in operations, building the news networks and the regional sports networks, et cetera. And now my background in technology,
Yeah.
actually building the infrastructure that powers all this, right? I think that there's an opportunity for whatever is next for me
Hmm.
to be able to put those three together and do
Hmm.
something that's pretty cool, because there are people who know a lot about content but know nothing about the other two.
Hmm.
There are people who know a lot about the other two but know nothing about content.
Right.
And ultimately, everything we're talking about is about the content,
Sure.
but it's about surfacing it smartly and with little speed bumps and as close to the user as, et cetera, which plays into the other two buckets, which I also understand.
Hmm.
So I think I've got a unique set of knowledge that sort of plays together in whatever that looks like next.
Yeah. Without question, and that was something that stood out to me as you were going through your story, is that you really have experienced, um, you know, the ins and outs of each of these three areas that you were talking about. I mean, you
Sure.
you you know exactly what it takes to put on a show, and you know exactly what it takes to the thought that goes into creating the show. And then now you're mixing that with all of the expertise for getting the show out there,
Sure.
in a
Sure.
different way. So you're right, it's kind of a trifecta, which is really exciting, and it's going to be really cool to see what's next, because what's next we can't imagine right now, probably. I mean, with
Right.
how quickly things are going, it's unbelievable. But I want to say, thank you so much. I've gotten a
Oh,
couple of
sure.
comments. They haven't been questions, but they've been comments. They've been well wishes from people. We had some people that know, classmate of ours, another person that graduated before us, that's just saying, like, so great to see you, so great to hear your stories and work experiences. One of your professors has weighed in and said that you have excelled in so many areas beyond
Oh,
communications,
that's
and
nice.
that she remembers your interest and success in marketing classes, and it's,
Thank you.
you know, I can share with you that that's Lois Her.
Oh, wow. Hi,
So
Professor. Thank you. Yes. No, that was business marketing. I love that. That was really interesting. I love that class.
how about it?
Really good.
Yeah, yeah. And we've
Definitely
had
great.
others that are just expressing their gratitude and saying that, you know, with a smiley face, they're just here to heckle. You know,
That works too.
but seriously, it's really, really great to have you here sharing, you
Thanks.
know, all that you've done and that you hope to do in the future. And again, you know, kind of how that connects back to Etown is really cool. And the ways that you've been involved to serve our alma mater, the ways that you will hopefully serve our alma mater in the future. It's very cool. And you are a Blue Jay through and through, Jeremy. And I'm really proud of you. And, you know, I'm just really happy that we're friends and that we're classmates. So
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mark. And thanks
yeah,
for asking me to do it. I really enjoyed it. And it's fun to sort of think about the stories and think about where it's all gone and where it's going. And just really good to connect at this time. It's very special. Thank you.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I'll also say that, you know, for our audience members, thanks so much for watching. And this is the first, like I said, this is kind of the season premiere of our Etown alumni feature series for this spring, the winter spring months. And we're the next one of these features is going to be on Tuesday of next week. And it features a 2009 graduate, Bryn Davis. This was actually one that we were going to have in December, and we needed to postpone it for various reasons until next Tuesday. But this is an alumnus who you know, the roots for his inspiration came during his time at Etown, but he started a restaurant chain in the Philadelphia area, and you know, all healthy fast food. And he has gotten inspired beyond those realms now, and he has expanded into the international realm, and he's just now starting to pivot his brand to a completely different realm. And he's concentrating on a completely plant-based food menu, and he's going to concentrate on areas of food insecurity. You know, where people are really they have needs as far as healthy food, plant-based food, things like that. So we're going to be going into all of that on Tuesday at 7 o'clock, February 2nd. So keep that in mind. And we have various other types of content. Jeremy, you'll appreciate this. We're varying our content as far as alumni is concerned. We've got these features. We have some alumni concerts that will be coming up later on this semester. And we also have the tried and true Etown Alumni Trivia Nights. And the next one of those is coming up February 18th. And for all of these things, you can visit those, you can check those details out at etownalumni.com/events. And for past concerts, past alumni features, this one will also be available after tonight at etownalumni.com/virtual recaps. So all of this is available, all of this content that we're producing, and you're helping us, Jeremy, with this tonight.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
I love it.
Yeah. But again, until next time, I am Mark Clapper. And for all of you who are watching, remember that we are Blue Jays always. Hope you have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you all. Nice to see you.